they have tested and at least said that this is good, clean stuff, you know, because there's a certain point where us understanding that it is an issue and that we're finding stuff in the drainage is one thing, but is it really our sort of responsibility to find the blend that works the best, or sort of put it back out there to industry, or at least academia, to help find that? But in the meantime, we're going to go at this slow pace and keep doing it.
Do you find any different elements coming from a TPO roof versus a bit, a asphalt roof?
Again, that's something we don't have enough different kind of roofs there, I think, to say that. I don't even know for sure. They're all
Richmond.
Yeah, I think so.
Broadway's modified bitumen. Hamilton, this one above us. Metro, it might be TPO, not TPO. It might be EPDM.
And that raises the question again: would you support a grant application for the monitoring of a TPO roof?
Oh, the question you asked earlier.
Yeah.
Would we support a grant for that?
If we wrote a grant to install the monitoring system on a finished TPO roof with a green roof, would that be something that you'd be interested in?
Well, certainly we'd be interested in the results of such a study. Whether we would be interested in paying for it or contributing toward it would be another factor, because we don't currently have that in our work plan to do that.
How much does it cost to monitor a building?
We've got the monitoring that Tim has been doing and others have been doing, but we haven't done that. You know, there are a lot of questions to ask. One is your study, what do you call, what's the term to assure that it's impartial and professionally done?
Scientific.
I mean, is it me doing it in my backyard, or is it, a crew or a group that's identified to be able to do this work? And that's where, our staff are trained and qualified, and they get paid a lot of money, to do this work and do it right. So that kind of question comes up as it relates to a private entity doing doing a study. So, but certainly we want to find out more. So if you have an idea that you want to kind of bounce around, we can talk about it sometime.
Yeah.
And see. But the answer is, at the moment, no. There isn't.
And if it's just samples brought, maybe it would be something where we could bring samples in at certain times.
You got to go through all kinds of protocols. You have to be trained to bring the samples in and everything else. We used to do that a little bit. They don't let us do it anymore.
Yeah.
So it's not easy. There's a lot to there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
To make it official,
Mm-hmm.
to be officially recognized as a good result.
It needs to be valid.
Yeah.
Scientifically
The validity
valid.
of information.
I have a totally different question, but for the roofs that have been in for a longer period of time, have you had any problems with or seen any ecosystem progression where other things are trying to move in and what you planted in the first place is now not suited?
Well, that's definitely a town question.
Yeah, that's not stormwater question. So, although maybe it's the stormwater that's making it happen.
Yeah,
Yes, there is a change in the plants and how they move and mature and die. And I was just noticing that yesterday on a building, that there are certain places on the Hamilton building where there are discrete associations of plants in one spot versus within a couple feet it changes and it becomes a different association of plants. That it's so old now that who knows what was actually planted in those locations. In this one area, it's not even plants that were planted. It's some kind of invasive grass. And it's just in an area about the size of this table. And it's there, and that's the only place it's ever been, and it hasn't moved. But so there's a lot going on with the plants that it's hard to explain. I mean, it's nature. That's the typical answer. Somebody told me that the Germans, if everything comes out just right, they said it's their design. If it doesn't, they say it's nature.
Well, I'm just wondering about things because I have it all the time in my yard. I have something that's coming up in the middle of one of my flower beds that I know I didn't put there, but it's becoming a tree. Squirrels?
Oh, yeah, there's
Birds?
yeah, the climates, the roofs, even if it's not close
Yeah.
to us, if it's a tall building where there aren't any squirrels, the birds and things like that. And there's, a few years ago, I was at the Hamilton and there was this grass coming up that had just this really pretty seed pod on it. And they were all horizontal. And I thought, what kind of grass is that? So I looked it up and it turns out it's some native prairie grass. And it was just, where did it come from? How did it get up on top of the Hamilton roof? And I don't know, maybe a bird that flew in from the prairie.
Inappropriate.
Huh?
How do you go through and determine which things that have seeded themselves are inappropriate and you need to remove them?
We haven't, well, we sort of have a basic, what do we have? It's hard to figure out. If it looks bad, depending on where it's located, and if it looks bad, then it's a weed. But for instance, so up here, because even though we don't have official tours or anything on this roof, people see it, politicians see it, and things like that. And if it's a weed that looks bad, then potentially it freaks people out and that kind of thing. Up on our Swan Island pump station, where nobody goes, and the weeds that came up when we went up there this couple weeks ago, whatever weeds they were in some of the trees, because we didn't water it, every weed died, and many of them just kind of shrank almost into nothing. So when you looked at the roof, most of it appeared manicured. I mean, literally, it was like, where are all the weeds and dead stuff? Except for one spot where it was a little bit different. And so it's hard. So it depends on where the roof is located, what the public exposure is, and then we all know that public perception of a landscape, which I don't know why, this seems to be such a strong thing in the United States. If it isn't green and manicured, there's something wrong with it.
Stuff like that. I was thinking about things that climb with suckers or have invasive roots.
Oh, no, yeah, those things we want to take out. Definitely trees.
Yeah.
If trees aren't dying out, because if they're getting enough water to survive, trees, you pull them out. That's a basic maintenance approach. You just don't want those roots, even with 5 feet of overlap or something like that. Just
They'll punch their way through.
if there's enough moisture to keep a tree alive through the summer, either irrigation or air conditioning condensate, or for some reason the tree has just survived in that spot, then pull it.
Yeah.
Once a year you just go through all the trees.
Blackberries, I've heard that blackberries have become something of a problem on some areas.
I didn't see blackberries for quite a number of years, but I have seen them on Hamilton. And I was up on this roof yesterday and I saw a blackberry here, and this is 3 inches of soil. Now, I have to say that we irrigated this a lot last summer, toward the end of the summer, because the maintenance crews were up on the roof going over the side, working on the walls, and they had so many guys running around on the Ecoroof, helter-skelter all over the place, that they were just smashing all the plants. So we turned up the irrigation to strengthen the plants, and that also had more opportunity for weeds. But anyway, so let's get back to stormwater, because that's why Tim's here. Although he likes these conversations.
I like plants too, sure.
I have a question, and I don't know how it falls, but I'm wondering how the monitoring, if indeed it is feeding back into the future design, and where do you get the idea of what the next soil blend is going to be? Does that come from Europe? Does it come from experience?
We're waiting for Tim to tell us.
Are you trying to optimize the components of the soil?
Well, it kind of goes back to, I think, what Tom was saying before. We've had this discussion internally of should the city specify, here's a great mix that seems to be working well, or should we let folks do their own analysis and come up with their own answers and just have to meet certain performance criteria, that type of thing. And I think the idea is we don't want to hamstring people. We don't want to say, here is the answer one. I don't think we have it yet. So, are we working towards something that would be guidance? Yeah, I think that we are, but we're not there yet. So, the idea would be, you can have 6 inches of a real porous soil media that you irrigate all the time. It's not going to do as well as a 3-inch soil that you don't irrigate as much and maybe has better retention properties. We can throw things like that out there. But I think our goal is to be able to have some flexibility. So if there is some new information from Europe that comes through, people can try those types of things and see how they work. Our main goal is to make sure that as we move towards these larger targets of Ecoroof so that we are getting a better product, then we have some kind of bookmarks that say here's a tolerance range, and we don't want you to go too far either way. But I don't think we want to be in the business of saying this is what you have to do.
Right now, you just have that depth limitation, is that about it?
That's it.
Although on every other stormwater management facility, you are in the business of saying this is what you have to do. Although, I mean,
Yeah.
as a user of the stormwater management manual, it's difficult to get at some of these issues, and it'd be nice to at least have suggestions. The 2004 manual didn't have the perfect blend of planting soil for infiltration facilities, but at least there were some percentages there that gave us some guidelines about what we were trying to get at.
Yep.
And now there's a very nice spec. So that kind of evolution, I think, you don't necessarily have to say this is what you have to do if you don't want to take on that liability because there's too many unknowns. But it would be nice to have some guidelines for the designers, just to, I think, the more you can help designers and simplify the process, the more willing they're going to be to bring it to the table. If they think that they don't have what they need to, they don't know what they need to do the design, and it's going to take a lot of effort, then they're not going to bring it to the table because they're too busy trying to get a permit for everything else.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. We have moved closer towards specifying exactly what we want for bioinfiltration mix. Here's a soil, here's a maximum % fines that we want in here, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. We don't want to limit it so much that you can only get it one place. I mean, that's always been the concern. And I wouldn't be surprised if for the next manual round we do have some more specifications in there. But at this point, we're not comfortable to say we have the answer to say here are the guidelines yet. I think we know a few things that have come out of the monitoring that seem to say we need to have some limitations on irrigation if we're going to be truly a stormwater management facility. If we're going to give you credit for it. If you're not asking for credit for stormwater and you want to do irrigation and keep the roof green all summer long and plant wildflowers and everything else on there, that's fine. But if you're going to have stormwater credit, I think you will see more. But we've always tried to make sure, at least now we're trying to make sure that before we take that step, we're confident that this is what we want to do. We want to have the installations out there that have shown us that this is working well before we go to it. Because sometimes we'll say, well, this doesn't seem to be working really well. Why don't we try this without having really tried it before, and we'll put it in there. It'll be a requirement. We don't want to do that. We want to actually have an answer.
And I think part of the difference is that with regard to stormwater facilities on the ground, we design and build many of our own, especially Green Street. So we've got hundreds and hundreds of projects out there, and then somebody in our group was assigned to really start looking at the soil issue as it pertained to these services facilities. We don't have hundreds of Ecoroofs that we can monitor, so we're way behind in terms of our experience with Ecoroofs at that scale that would bring us to do a spec for our own facilities that we do and then have that spec for others. So I think that does relate, though, to the issue that we do have our own city buildings. So we will be working to find the spec that we would say, okay, here's the spec we want for our city buildings, and then either share that or say, here's what we recommend or whatever we do, but we'll put that out there so others can say, okay, here's what the city uses for its buildings. Yeah, and the sooner the better. Right. Okay. So,
Yeah.
Do you monitor the suppliers and what they are selling?
Well, as for Ecoroofs, no, because we're not there yet. For the bioretention facilities?
No, I mean, for Ecoofs.
not yet.
Okay.
Actually, one of the suppliers was here and we were talking, and he brought up some issues that were really, really great as it relates to pollutants and things like that. So it's on his wavelength, so that's good. And I think a lot of people in this industry are seeing that they strike me as being responsible and looking at a lot of these issues. So I'm kind of optimistic as long as we keep working toward that.
So along that line, Europe's been at this for, what, a decade or two longer than us? Has
Two or three, yeah.
Has the free market evolved over there, whereby they've got good mixes that are tested and true? And, it sounds like you're sort of looking ahead to that happening here.
I was reading a paper the other day, and I should share this paper with you too, because it's about stormwater monitoring, about pollutants in stormwater. The not the University of Illinois, but it's a university in Illinois, and I can't remember which one it is. At any rate, they were doing research on recycled products and taking water quality samples from test plots, Ecoroof test plots. And they used one of the blends that is being, it's a German blend being produced in Ohio, and they used that blend. And in terms of the concentrations of pollutants in that blend, it was worse than some of the other ones that they had blended themselves, the professor from the university. So is that because the blend is all not that good, or is it because the blenders in Ohio did something wrong, or what? So, and I don't know that in looking at the stuff from Germany, some of the bits and pieces that I've seen, that they have a lot of combined sewer systems. So the actual pollutants are going into a treatment system versus a lot of our conditions where we don't have a treatment system, it's going right into a creek or something. So I've been wondering how much work they really did on water quality, and I don't think they did much till this particular decade. And so I don't know that they're ahead of us on that, but I'm not sure. So I don't know if you've seen papers recently from others about.
Yeah, there's definitely been more research done in it recently. Not from Europe, though, and I don't know whether that's because it doesn't exist or whether I just haven't delved far enough. But in the United States, Penn State and several other universities are doing quite a bit of research on what's going on. Just in the last couple of years, you see more and more of it, because there are TMDLs in various watersheds that are impacted potentially by runoff from any kind of facility, and so you're starting to see more. But again, it is, I think, going to be pretty specific. There are so many blends out there now, at least it seems to me that there are. And each one is going to behave slightly differently because it's got a slightly different combination of all the constituents to it. So, it's one of those things where we want to have that variability and diversity, but to some degree that's also going to mean we're going to get some interesting results on the water quality side of things in particular. In the combined sewer area, we want these things for quantity reduction, and the water quality is not quite so important. And then in the separated area, we want, some quantity reduction, but water quality becomes a lot more important. And so there's a lot of different interests here. And in Germany, I know they use a lot of mineral soils without a lot of organics in them, and I just can't imagine they're going to be real good at quantity reduction because of that. There's not a lot to hold water there. There's the pores inside the minerals, and that's it. And so I think they've had different goals as they've gone about their work. So it's just now that I think we're all starting to come together into similar goals of protecting the watersheds and looking at volume management. So that might be why, even though they've been doing eco-roofs for many decades, that their research is just kind of on a par with ours, I think.
View runoff for things like rainwater harvesting, would you think that it's better coming out of a green roof than off TPO or a metal roof without any kind of soil? Are there elements that you're worried about if people were to start using it for, not potable or even potable?
And there's a lot of requirements to use the harvested rainwater for potable. If you're just using it for irrigation, it's a little easier, even though it does have to meet certain requirements. But that said, we just had the Hawthorne Hostel here in town just put in a reusable cistern system, and lots of permitting requirements, but they were able to get it through, so you certainly can do that. But yeah, definitely there are going to be different concerns. As I said, the zinc coming off of conventional roofs is much higher than what we've seen coming off of an eco-roof. And for plants and macroinvertebrates like worms, that could be a problem if you've got real high levels of that. I think, too, coming off of a modified bitumen system, you're going to see more oil-type products coming off a conventional roof than you are going to see in an eco-roof, which filters that out a little bit better. So there are definitely going to be different characteristics in the stormwater, but they both have to meet the same requirements if you're going to use them for various things. So regardless of where the water comes from, it has to meet a certain requirement to be used as potable water, flushing toilets, that type of thing. So.
I have a question again about the plants. I was just curious, how much better is an eco-roof that's loaded up with sedum that's 6, 12 inches high, whatever, at retaining stormwater than just that 4 inches of equal soil?
And that's something, all of our roofs that we monitor are planted, and so we don't have a roof that's bare. Oregon State in their test plots, I believe they have 20 plus plots that they constructed earlier this year, late last year. they are looking at planted versus unplanted, so just plain straight soil. Certainly the transpiration of plants, I think, plays a role, especially during the active growing season. In the middle of the winter time, is there really much of a difference? I would suspect not. I would suspect that there isn't a big difference.
It's going to grow there anyway, so you might as well put in something that.
Oh, well, they did. I was at OSU in August after we had that first August storm. It was about 3/4 of an inch. And those test plots that they have that are bare roof, they have bare soil, and then they have planted roofs. So the bare roofs had 5 gallons drain off. The soil roof had 2 gallons drain off. And all of the vegetated roofs had 0 discharge for a summer storm, which
So as they
I was pretty
gather more
excited.
data.
It's like,
I wasn't
oh,
willing to
plants
tout
work.
that as a definitive result yet.
Oh, it sounds, it's
There you
right,
go.
it's not definitive.
But, it'd stand to reason
Yeah,
that
but it's
overall it
interesting.
helps to have plants.
Effect, if nothing else, right? All those
There's-
leaves and foliage collect water that just sits there that never even hits the soil.
I have a feeling that the roots, the microorganisms, the foliage, that there's this whole, symbiotic thing going on that's.
It definitely creates a system. My only question, being the engineer that I am, is if we just had dandelions growing up there, how would that compare to having sedum growing up there? So that's something of interest to me. As you say, if you have bare soil up there, something will probably grow, and it's interesting to see. Well, does that make a difference enough if it's moss or if it's some weed species? How does that vary from sedum or something more traditional that we're used to putting on roofs?
When we talk to our clients, what's the minimum percentage that you feel like on an annual basis we can say water quantities are reduced by? I mean, if we told people 40%, is that a number that everybody could feel comfortable about?
It's a number that I personally feel comfortable with. I think 40% is where I would have gone with it. Probably I think Metro came up with a number in the range of 25% after a year of monitoring, so a little bit lower. So that's the low point that I can think of that I've heard right now. So I think you're going to see a wide range, but I think 40% is a good average, and I think that we should target at least that. I think 50% is what we like to talk about as being our ultimate goal. Hamilton, which is the roof we've monitored the longest and have the best data on, is 56, I think, annually over the last 7 years. And that's kind of in the neighborhood of what we'd like to see.
Oh, but that's peaked out.
Well, we'll see. There are so many variabilities. It's amazing. I mean,
No, Tom talked about that earlier.
it's not just how much rain you get during the year; it's how it falls. If you have 8 inches of rain during a month and it all falls in 2 events, you'll get much different runoff than if it fell evenly throughout the whole month. I mean, there's all those things that play into it that make it difficult, but. If we're seeing 40%, I mean, I think that's pretty good. I mean, especially since we get most of our rain during the winter time. I mean, it's a very specified 6-month period. We get very wet, and if we're still seeing that type of retention, even with that rainfall regime, in the East Coast, where you get rainfall more spread throughout the year, I would expect they could do better. But that's a reasonable improvement, and certainly for peak flow, for separated watersheds where they're going into creeks and streams, and for our sewer system, it's a huge benefit. And any volume we can take out of the combined sewer system is a good thing for us. So we'd like to see higher numbers, but 40% is still pretty meaningful for us.
Especially when you think about the pre-developed site and what that was evapotranspiring before we got here,
Yep.
and how we don't have that as a component in any other stormwater management, as a stormwater management requirement.
Right. It should be better no matter what than a conventional roof would be. Though, conventional roofs to some degree have some retention too. They have puddles that form up there, and there's a little bit of retention as well. But whatever we get, we see as a benefit for sure. Yes.
Be down here very much of the time, just for like 10 minutes total. But I was interested, so you might have talked about this, but I was interested in like organic gardening on the flat roof that I have at home. And went to the organic fair, and there was a guy talking about doing vegetable gardening on roofs in PVC piping and stuff like that, some kind of piping. And
We
that's
should
all.
talk to this person right here in the front,
Okay.
which, is that a direct stormwater question for Tim?
No, it's just.
Oh, okay, because Okay, good. I thought I might have missed part of it.
So, tell me a little bit more about what you said.
Could we just finish so that Tim, if he has to leave?
Yeah.
Tim is here to talk about stormwater, so he's been here for about this hour now. I don't know if he's getting worn out or anything, but so if we could just finish with the stormwater, then we'll get to some of these other questions. So, anybody more with stormwater questions for Tim?
Okay. How far into the Fano Creek and Tryon Creek do you actually monitor? Do you have many sites in Fano Creek?
Oh, as far as actually monitoring the stream itself?
Or just the runoff into Fano? There was something about a different standard for the Fano Creek Basin?
Yeah, so for streams that drain into the Tualatin River, which includes Fano, not Tryon. Tryon drains into the Willamette. But anybody that drains, any creek that drains into Tualatin River has a limit for phosphorus.
Too, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's because of algal blooms in the summertime and the problems with dissolved oxygen going down, and also the aesthetics and smell and everything else that's occurring in the river. So each individual river is evaluated separately as far as what pollutants are of particular concern. Mm-hmm. So I believe Fano is the only of our watersheds that has a phosphorus TMDL. The others do not.
And you have a monitoring site out there?
So yeah, the watershed, we're divided into watershed groups and watershed services, and so each one has a monitoring program of some sort. So there are certain stations along each of the rivers where samples are taken at particular intervals to meet regulatory requirements.
But do you have a roof that's being monitored?
No, I don't think so. We have one in Tryon now, Tryon Headwaters there, but we're not currently monitoring that roof. And to my knowledge, that's the only roof I can think of in that area. But certainly as we move forward and get more and more Ecoroof out there, it would be nice to have monitoring done from various parts of the city. And certainly because of the unique requirements of each of those watersheds for runoff quality, we'll probably need to do that in order to figure out what's happening.
Do you have a source that I can find a lot of these sort of leaching requirements, like certain stormwater standards for different ecosheds and watersheds?
So DEQ, the Oregon DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, has a website. There are streams that are called 303D listed streams, and they have different listings for water quality parameters in each of the main watersheds here in the city. So I don't think it should be too hard to find if you go onto their website and do a search.
Yeah, just in the context that I am doing rooftop agriculture, like food production in rooftops. So I want to make sure that I'm, aware of certain areas that, like with the Fano Creek.
Right.
I think Columbia Street doesn't have a TMDL for phosphorus.
Not to my knowledge.
So what's the cost of monitoring?
Well, it's different. I think for the city to do it, it's probably different than for private to do it. But sampling a storm event, analyzing the samples for the things we talked about is in probably the $1,200 range, something of that sort. And then there's the labor to go out there. You basically have to go out and set up, hopefully before the storm really gets going. They try to get out there before the storm gets started, and then they try to grab a sample at just the right time. So there's a set out time and a labor time, which is a big part of it too. So ultimately for us, it's probably about $2,500 a sample. Somewhere in there.
A sample that's...
This is a water quality sample.
Just water quality?
Just the water quality.
So for Hamilton, everything included at Hamilton in the course of a year, how much do we spend?
Let's see. It would be about $10,000, $11,000 probably.
Per year at that site in this flow for one location, and we take water quality samples
from two locations.
Two drains.
And that's monitored year-round, the flow, huh?
Yeah.
The flow is monitored all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to give you an idea why we don't have sites all over the place.
Yeah. And how much I could ask for a grant for?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
That's where
it's not easy business.
Thank you.
It's pretty.
And would you go to some place like Carlton Testing for lab results, or do you do the lab results in-house, or?
We do most of them in-house. We have a water pollution control lab over by the St. John's Bridge that runs most of the analyses for us. There are a couple they send out to a third-party lab, and I'm not sure who they send it out to, but most of them they can do.
Great.
Okay, so now we have to wrap it up. You might have more questions, but we're running out of time. So as it relates to stormwater, thank you, Tim, for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for your questions for Tim. Should we give him a hand?
Carry
Okay, so now if there's any other question for anybody else, then I think the person in the back had a question for you. You wanted to know about gardening, and Erin is actually starting a business in gardening and such, so you might ask her. Well, you could ask your question again to the general group, but matter of fact, what was your question?
Well,
And maybe you guys could talk offline a little bit. Go ahead.
I'm interested in organic gardening on my roof, which is a pretty large flat roof that I have. And I'm really curious about if any studies have been done about the materials that you have to make an eco roof with, and you know how they might affect the food that you're eating.
So we as the city have not gone into that area. And the only person I know in this room that has, although maybe some of you have as well, is Erin. So you could either, if you want to try and answer her questions or give her information, if you all want to hear.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
So, well, I'm working with OSU. OSU has offered me to work with me, like as a business pursuing a master's in horticulture, to set up a demonstration site with monitoring equipment for a rooftop agriculture demonstration site. And my proposal actually included looking at testing all of the materials, air quality, water quality, drainage issues, looking at any chemicals being leached from any of the materials being associated in the system. And so that's something that, from what most of us can find, at least what's out there on the internet and put on others, what really hasn't been tested too much. So that's something that I'm setting up to determine. Project that I apprenticed under was the rocket rooftop vegetable garden. And so I really was able to see what worked, what didn't, in terms of soil, in terms of drainage, in terms of lack of pathways and how that affected, especially just compaction. And so I can talk with you, more later if you'd like, but for design, installation, and maintenance services. So in terms of the pipe, I would definitely try to stay away from PVC piping, but more maybe over like an HDPE, which you can get at other, department stores and whatnot, like Home Depot.
Were you at the organic fair?
I was at Muddy Boot and
yeah,
the rain.
yeah, and the guy had like kids' pools that he was putting lettuce in. And,
So that's the project that I apprenticed under, but I wouldn't use baby pools because that's not a tested plastic. So I'm working more like an HDPE and more like what water pipes are made out of, and then those are actually the products that we're going to be looking at testing through OSU, just to even see, okay, well, these still aren't necessarily food grade plastics, so what can we use safely?
glass.
So, but that also can withstand UV rays and everything else on a rooftop. So
Ceramic.
yeah.
Clay pot.
So yeah, there's a lot of different options. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so I assume we've reached the end of the Ecoroof specific questions. Did anybody else have something? Oh, good, okay.
One more specific question.
Okay.
On drainage mats, I'm doing a very small green roof. It has a 5 and 12 slope. Yeah, and I'm using a GAF system that has the whole thing, the drainage mat. It has the metal angles that retain the soil and the soil mix itself.
Oh.
But I guess what I'm wondering is how important is the drainage mat? Is it more important on a sloped roof or less important? I mean, I can see on a sloped roof where the soil might run off too much without it.
You know, I wouldn't say that, I mean, I don't know enough about sloped roofs to be able to answer that question. And if a company has put together a product, which I'm always skeptical of anybody's product, but
Yes.
you know, I mean, but if they say you need the drainage mat relative to their product, you kind of have to go with what they say unless you modify it and then you possibly void other aspects of whatever they're giving you.
But I don't have to go with a product.
That's right. So on the ones that I know of that have been built without a drainage mat, well, with a slope, and they don't have a drainage mat. So the one that was done in Southeast at the Jonette Opinilla's property was, there was no drainage mat. It's got that, as we showed you, it's got that sort of lattice work. The
That
water.
was the slide you had.
Right, and the
Yeah.
water goes down, it hits that, it goes over, and then it makes its way down through the soil. It's a porous soil, so it appears fine. We have one that's called a BES test roof. It's not real big, it's 24 by 16, and it doesn't have any drainage mat, and it actually has not a real porous soil, sort of medium porosity. And it doesn't have a drainage mat. And my garage doesn't have a drainage mat. Metro doesn't, well, Metro's flat, and my garage is actually flat. It's about a 5 degree, something like that, but nothing like yours.
Yeah, that's.
So I do have a magazine from Germany that shows construction of an Ecoroof on a slope, and it has materials in it. I'll look for that, and you could, just so you could take a look, and anybody else can take a look. I'll bring you to some of the materials for the next meeting.
But that Orpanella is probably close to a 512.
It's a 412, yeah.
412.
But-
Pretty close.
But
Yeah.
have you found that a drainage mat dries the soil out quickly and it might need more
We've been
irrigation?
worried about that aspect of a drainage map. We don't actually have monitored, documented proof that that occurs, but it does seem that it's a logical thing to anticipate. And then, does the drain mat actually give you any stability on a slope? Because you still have that filter fabric that separates the soil from the drain mat itself. So does the drain mat really work? Now, if a drain mat didn't have that and it had all those things sticking up, that would seem to help with holding the soil on, but it would no longer be a drain mat. It would be more of a holding type mat for the soil. And you saw some of these have little knobs that are sticking up, an inch or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a whole range of those different types of things, which I've kind of thought, well, that might be, you just modify a drain mat and use it as a material to help hold the soil on the roof. Until you get to that sheer, what's that distance when that's helping hold that, but it goes so far that no longer does it help, and have the roots gone deep enough to do that, and have the roots taken effect fast enough to actually help, provide that. Good questions. Anyway, I'll look for this document and see, because it's got some good pictures. And if you can read German, you can tell us what it says.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to kind of close up unless any more questions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you.